the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But before endless wars consumed the stars, before brother turned upon brother, before empires bled and gods rose from the warp, there was a vision. And that vision belonged to one man, the emperor of mankind. Humanity was not always broken. Once it touched the stars in triumph. The dark age of technology saw mankind rise to impossible heights. Machines that thought, ships that pierced the void in an instant, empires without hunger, without war. For a time man was as gods, but perfection does not last. The warp opened its jaws and swallowed human civilization whole. Warp storms cut off world from world. Artificial intelligences turned on their masters. Demons clawed through reality. The great empire of man was drowned in fire and silence. This collapse was called the Age of Strife, the Long Night. And across thousands of worlds, mankind forgot itself. Worlds fell into savagery. Rulers became tyrants. Cults worshipped false gods. What once was a golden age became nothing more than ash scattered in the void. Yet in this darkness, there was one who endured. The Emperor. His true origin is shrouded in myth. Some say he was the first and greatest of humanity's psychers, born immortal, watching in secret for thousands of years. Others whisper that he was the reincarnation of countless shamans of old, their souls bound together to create a guardian for all mankind. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. He had always been there, silent, patient, eternal. When the galaxy cried out in its darkest hour, the Emperor revealed himself. No longer a hidden shepherd, but a warlord, a conqueror, and a god made flesh. His vision was vast, yet clear. Unify mankind. Tear down false gods. Build an Imperium that would stand eternal. And so began the unification wars upon Terra. The Earth he inherited was a wasteland of techno-barbarian tyrants, mutants, and warlords. To cleanse it, he forged the Thunder Warriors, brutal giants of gene-forged flesh. They were not men nor truly stable, but they were unstoppable. In fire and blood, they brought Terra to heel. Yet the Emperor knew they were flawed. They would wither. They would break. They were weapons only for the present, not for the future. He needed something greater. Not mere soldiers, but legends. Not tools, but sons. In secret vaults beneath the surface of Terra, he worked. Blending science, sorcery, and his own unmatched psychic will, he began to shape beings that could carry his dream across the stars. They would be the ultimate generals, philosophers, rulers, and warlords. They would be his heirs. They would be demigods. They would be the Primarchs. 20 were crafted, each embodying a fragment of the Emperor himself. Strength, wisdom, fury, pride, resolve. They were to be perfect. They were to be his greatest creation. But the warp was watching, and in the shadows of eternity, the dark gods plotted. They could not allow the Emperor to bring forth such champions untainted by their touch. In a single night of terror, the gestation chambers of the Primarchs were breached. Warp energies howled through reality. The children were stolen, scattered across the galaxy, each hurled to a distant alien world. The Emperor could only watch as his perfect sons vanished, his greatest work undone, his destiny fractured, and yet he did not despair. For in their absence, he created the Legiones Astartes, space marines, warriors born from the Primarchs' genetic templates. They would be the first step in his Great Crusade, the vanguard of his armies. But somewhere across a broken galaxy, 20 demigods grew, alone, untouched by their father's hand, raised not in the halls of Terra, but in the crucible of strange, hostile worlds. They would rise. They would fall. They would be heroes. They would be monsters. Their triumphs would light the stars, and their tragedies would cast shadows that endure to this day. This is their story. The story of the Primarchs, born of the Emperor, claimed by the stars, and damned by the gods. The Emperor of mankind had a dream, a vision of order, of unity, of mankind no longer lost in darkness. To make that vision real, he would need more than soldiers. He would need heirs. He would need gods of war, bound in mortal flesh. He would need sons. In secret laboratories deep beneath Terra, shielded from the eyes of mortals and the whispers of the warp, the Emperor began his greatest work. Using knowledge forbidden to all others, he wove together science, psychic power, and mastery of the human genome. 20 children were shaped in those vaults. They were not born of chance. They were not born of love. They were sculpted, forged, designed to be demigods. Each Primarch was a fragment of the Emperor's own being, magnified into perfection. One would embody his strategic genius, another his martial fury, one his charisma, one his iron will. Each son was meant to be unique, yet together they would be whole. They were more than generals. They were to be philosophers, kings, and prophets. They were to be the leaders of the Legion as Astartes, who would carry the light of Terra across the void. Where the Emperor could not be, his sons would stand. Where he could not rule, they would govern. It should have been the dawn of a golden age, but the warp does not suffer such defiance without answer. For as the Primarchs grew in their gestation chambers, something stirred in the Imperium. 4 dark gods of chaos, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, turned their gaze upon Terra. The Emperor, for all his genius, had dared to build champions who would stand against them. They would not allow it. And so the sabotage began. Warp storms erupted around Terra. The barrier between real space and nightmare weakened. Demonic claws reached through the veil. The fortress labs that held the Primarchs shuddered, and then, in a single night of horror, the impossible happened. The 20 gestation capsules, each holding an infant Primarch, were torn from the Emperor's grasp. One by one, they vanished into the storm. The warp swallowed them whole and flung them across the galaxy like seeds scattered by a cruel wind. Some fell upon savage, feral worlds. Some landed among tyrants and kings. Some upon poisoned wastelands, others upon paradise worlds. Each child was alone, shaped not by the Emperor's guiding hand, but by the cruel embrace of chance. Imagine the Emperor's fury. His perfect sons lost. His greatest plan, broken before it could even begin. For the first time in his long existence, his work had been undone not by mortal weakness, but by the will of the gods. Yet he did not abandon his dream. The genetic foundations of the Primarchs had survived. From their lost essence, he forged the first Space Marines. Legions of warriors, each designed in the image of a son he no longer held. These would be his tools to begin the Great Crusade, but he never stopped searching. For he knew that somewhere in the galaxy his sons still lived, alone, growing into men without knowing their father's name. Each was a weapon without a master, a god without a guide. And so, the galaxy waited. On Chthoniya, a child would grow among gangs of murderers. On Fenris, another would be raised by wolves. On Prospero, one would become a sorcerer king. On Baal, a child would drink the blood of monsters just to survive. And on Colchis, another would be worshipped as a messiah. 20 children, 20 destinies. The Emperor would one day find them. But by then, their worlds would already have shaped them. Their flaws would be carved deep. Their pride, their wrath, their faith, their ambition. And in those flaws, chaos saw opportunity. The scattering of the Primarchs was not only a tragedy, it was the beginning of a war for their very souls. The galaxy was vast. The warp was hungry. The Emperor's sons were lost. And in their loss, the seeds of heresy were sown. The Emperor had lost his sons, torn from his grasp, scattered across a galaxy drowning in nightmare. Yet still he pressed forward. From their stolen essence, he had forged the Legiones Astartes. They would be his blade, his hammer, his shield. But even the mightiest warriors could not compare to the demigods who had been taken from him. The Primarchs were gone, and the Emperor would not rest until he had found them. The Great Crusade began as fire upon the stars. From the cradle of Terra, fleets of impossible scale took flight. Countless warships, bristling with weaponry, carried forth the banners of the new Imperium. At their head, the Emperor himself, resplendent, terrible, radiant. His Astartes marched in their tens of thousands, warriors bred for nothing but conquest. They fell upon the scattered remnants of humanity like a storm. On feral worlds, they brought civilization at the edge of a blade. On forge worlds, they broke the chains of tech cults and bound the Mechanicum to the Imperium's cause. Alien empires were annihilated. Human warlords and tyrants were crushed beneath the Emperor's will. With every battle, with every victory, the dream of unity grew stronger. But though the Imperium spread like wildfire, the Emperor's search for his lost children never ceased. Across every star system, every frontier, he sent out silent whispers, searching for the demigods that chaos had stolen. And one by one, he found them. The first was Horus. Cast to the world of Chthoniya, a planet of collapsing minds and brutal gangs, Horus had risen as a warlord even as a child. When the Emperor found him, Horus knelt without hesitation. Father and son reunited. Horus was not just strong, he was brilliant, charismatic, beloved. The Emperor saw in him the brightest reflection of his own will. And so Horus became the first of the Primarchs to lead the legions. Together, father and son burned across the stars in victory. For nearly 30 years, Horus fought at his father's side, never faltering, never failing. And in those years, The bond between them grew unbreakable, or so it seemed. One by one, the lost sons were discovered. On Fenris, the Emperor found Leman Russ, raised among wolves and hardened by a world of endless war. Fierce, savage, yet loyal beyond question, Russ swore his claws to his father. On Prospero, he found Magnus the Red, a giant touched with psychic might unlike any seen before. Scholar, sorcerer, king, Magnus was brilliance incarnate, and yet haunted by the warp that had claimed him. On Baal, among irradiated wastes, he found Sanguinius, the angel, wings stretched from his back, a mutation that should have damned him, yet instead inspired all who looked upon him. Noble, tragic, beloved, Sanguinius was hope-given flesh. On Colchis, a world steeped in faith, he found Lorgar, a child raised as a prophet, who saw in the Emperor not just a ruler, but a god. His devotion burned brighter than any star, though the Emperor demanded no worship. On Nocturne, he found Vulcan, a smith and a protector, as kind as he was strong, among the most human of his sons. On Medusa, Ferrus Manus, whose hands turned to living metal, unyielding and merciless. On Barbarus, Mortarion, raised in a land of poison, who had breathed death from birth. His hatred for tyranny, matched only by his bitterness. And more. Angron, Perturabo, Guilliman, Fulgrim, Kurz, Dorn, Alpharius, and Omegon. 20 sons, each forged by worlds that had scarred them, shaped them, hardened them, each one magnificent, each one flawed. With every son found, the crusade grew mightier. The Primarchs took command of their legions. The Space Marines, once nameless warriors, now bore the colors, the heraldry, the doctrines of their fathers. The Ultramarines spread order and law beneath Roboute Guilliman. The Blood Angels carried the angelic fury of Sanguinius. The Space Wolves howled with the savagery of Russ. The World Eaters bled with the rage of Angron. The Thousand Sons bent the warp itself under Magnus. The Word-Bearers preached the faith of Lorgar. The Iron Warriors built fortresses unbreakable under Perturabo. The Night Lords ruled through terror with Conrad Kersey. Each legion, each Primarch, was a weapon. Together, they were unstoppable. World after world was brought into the fold. Humanity was rising again. The stars themselves trembled beneath the banners of the Aquila, and in every victory the people of these worlds looked upon the Primarchs as gods. Angels of war, sons of light. They were saviors, conquerors, kings. But the Emperor had warned them. They were not to be worshipped. There was no God but reason, no faith but truth, the imperial truth, and in that command cracks began to form. For the Primarchs were not machines. They were not perfect. They were beings of flesh, of pride, of passion. And in the fires of conquest, their flaws began to reveal themselves. Horus was beloved, but envy followed him. Why should he be first among equals? Lorgar burned with faith, but the Emperor's rejection of worship cut him deeper than any blade. Magnus wielded sorcery with brilliance, but his father forbade its use. Angron seethed with rage, shackled to a world he had never chosen. Kurz saw only doom, his visions of a grim future poisoning every act. Fulgrim sought perfection, never satisfied. Perturabo built wonders, but resented every slight, every praise denied. Even Guilliman, ever dutiful, began to dream of building his own empire within an empire. And as the seeds of pride, envy, and doubt took root, the warp watched. Chaos whispered. The scattering of the Primarchs had given the dark gods what they needed. Sons shaped not by the Emperor, but by flawed worlds, flawed men, flawed destinies. The galaxy celebrated their rise. But already, the shadow of their fall stretched across the stars. The Great Crusade was the age of glory, the time of triumphs. But all golden ages are fleeting. And for the sons of the Emperor, pride would be the blade that cut deepest of all. Every golden age carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. The Great Crusade blazed like a fire across the galaxy, conquering world after world. The Primarchs led their legions to glory, each son carving his own legend into the stars. To the people of the Imperium, they were heroes. To their enemies, they were monsters. But to themselves, they were brothers. And like all brothers, they were bound not only by loyalty, but by rivalry, by envy, by wounds that could not be seen. And it was in those hidden wounds that chaos found its opening. Among the first cracks was Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word-Bearers. Raised on the world of Colchis, he had been shaped in fire and scripture, a prophet worshipped by millions. To him, the Emperor was not just a father, not just a conqueror, he was a god, and Lorgar worshipped him as such. Wherever his legion marched, They raised temples. On every conquered world, statues of the emperor rose. Sermons echoed, and billions knelt in prayer. To Lorgar, this was truth. The emperor was divine, but the emperor rejected it. He had decreed the imperial truth. There were no gods, no spirits, no superstitions. Mankind would believe only in reason, in progress, in unity. Religion was a chain. Faith was a lie. When the emperor discovered Lorgar's devotion, his fury was terrible. He commanded the Ultramarines under Robert Guilliman to burn Lorgar's greatest city to the ground. Monarchia, the shining beacon of worship, was annihilated in fire. Its millions of faithful scattered to ash. Before the ruins, the emperor humiliated Lorgar and his sons, forcing them to kneel in shame. The wound never healed. In that humiliation, bitterness festered, and into that bitterness the whispers of chaos slithered. The word-bearers would remember. They would never forgive. If Lorgar's flaw was faith, Magnus the Red's was knowledge. Born upon Prospero, he was the greatest psyker among the Primarchs, second only to the Emperor himself. He did not fear the warp, he sought to master it. To Magnus, sorcery was not corruption, it was enlightenment. But the Emperor had forbidden such paths. He knew what lurked within the warp, he knew the cost. He forbade his sons to delve too deeply, yet Magnus ignored him. The thousand sons studied the arcane, bending reality, communing with powers beyond mortal sight. They grew strong, yes, but also unstable. Flesh mutated, minds fractured, demons whispered. The gifts of chaos crept into their souls, cloaked as wisdom. The Emperor's warning was clear: abandon sorcery. Magnus swore obedience with his lips, but in secret he continued, for Magnus believed only he could protect his father's dream from the dangers of the warp. He would master it, where even the Emperor hesitated. But hubris is always the first step to ruin. Another crack was Angron, the Lord of the World Eaters. Found upon the world of Nuceria, Angron had been a gladiator, enslaved and butchered for the amusement of tyrants. In his skull were buried the butcher's nails, brutal implants that drove him into endless fury, punishing him with agony unless he shed blood. When the Emperor came to claim him, Angron was leading a hopeless revolt. He begged his father to stand with him, to fight and die with his people. But the Emperor refused. With a wave of his will, he teleported Angron away. Abandoning the rebels to slaughter, Angron never forgave him. He led his legion as a weapon, yes, but he despised the Emperor, despised the dream of unity. The butcher's nails gnawed at his sanity, and he spread his curse to his sons, implanting them as he had been implanted. The World Eaters became butchers, berserkers, killers. Their discipline rotted. Their fury consumed them. Angron was not a general. He was a slave of rage. And in his rage, chaos waited. Perturabo, master of the Iron Warriors, was the greatest builder of fortresses, the greatest breaker of sieges. His genius was unmatched in engineering and warcraft. Yet he was never loved for it. Others won glory in the open field, basking in the adoration of the masses. Perturabo's battles were long, grinding wars of attrition. His victories were bloody, thankless, unseen. His sons bled in shadows, while others were praised as heroes. And Perturabo noticed every slight, every word of praise denied, every honor passed to another. His bitterness was a slow poison, dripping year after year, until his heart was iron and his soul was hollow. The dark gods did not need to tempt him with whispers. His own resentment was enough. And then there was Kurz, the Night Haunter. Born upon the nightmare world of Nostramo, he had been shaped by darkness and crime. His justice was terror. His law was fear. He ruled through violence, and where he walked, blood flowed like rivers. But more terrible than his cruelty was his gift, visions of the future. Kurz saw what was to come, and what he saw was death, betrayal, the fall of the Imperium, the death of brothers, the murder of gods, he told his father. He told his brothers. They called him mad. They called him cursed, and so Kurz embraced it. If doom was inevitable, then he would become its prophet. If the Imperium was destined to fall, then he would hasten its fall. His every act, every atrocity, was a step toward the nightmare he knew must come. And in the warp, the dark gods laughed, yet above them all was Horus, the first found, the brightest star, the Emperor's chosen. When the Emperor left the Crusade to build his secret project upon Terra, the Golden Throne, the gateway to mankind's true future, he named Horus as War Master, Supreme Commander of the Legions. No title could have been greater, no honor higher. To the galaxy, Horus was the Emperor's right hand. To his brothers, he was first among equals. But in the warp, eyes turned upon him. The greatest prize, the greatest weapon. the favored son who, if corrupted, could shatter everything the Emperor had built. The dark gods prepared their snare, and Horus, adored and exalted, began to walk the path that would damn them all. Lorgar's wounded faith, Magnus's forbidden sorcery, Angron's chains of rage, Perturabo's bitterness, Curz's madness, and Horus's pride. Each flaw was a crack, and through those cracks chaos seeped in. The scattering of the Primarchs had planted the seeds. Their worlds had shaped them, their scars defined them. And now, as the Imperium stood at the height of its glory, those seeds began to bloom. Brothers loved each other, yet mistrusted. They honored each other, yet envied. They swore loyalty to their father, yet questioned his will. The galaxy looked upon the Primarchs as gods. But gods are flawed. Gods can bleed. Gods can fall. The Great Crusade was victory upon victory, but beneath the triumphs the seeds of division grew. And soon, those seeds would bear their terrible fruit. The Horus Heresy was coming. Every empire believes itself eternal. Every golden age sings of its immortality. But nothing lasts forever, for even the brightest star burns out, and when it does, it collapses into darkness. For the Imperium of man, that darkness had a name, and his name was Horus. The War Master had led the crusade to countless victories. He was adored by his brothers, worshipped by his legion, and beloved by the Imperium soldiers. To many he was already a god of war, but even gods can bleed. On the world of Davin, Horus was wounded. A cursed blade pierced his flesh, tainted not by mortal poison, but by the warp itself. The wound festered, beyond even the gene-forged healing of a Primarch. As his body failed, he was carried into the temple of the Serpent Lodge, a place steeped in darkness. There, as his warriors despaired, the priests of chaos began their work. They did not heal him with medicine. They healed him with lies, Horus dreamed. He saw visions of the future, a future where the Emperor abandoned his sons, chained to a throne of golden machinery, worshipped as a god he had sworn he would never be. He saw the Imperium not as a beacon of unity, but as a tyranny of endless war. He saw betrayal not as possibility, but as destiny. And when Horus awoke, he was changed. The beloved son, the favored heir, the brightest star, now burned with the fire of rebellion. Horus was not corrupted in isolation, for already one of his brothers had fallen. Lorgar, humiliated and broken after Monarchia, had sought new gods, and in the shadows of the warp, he had found them. He and his word-bearers had bent their knees not to the Emperor, but to chaos. They had worshipped in secret, preaching their dark faith beneath the banners of loyalty. And it was Lorgar who whispered to Horus, Lorgar who stoked his doubts, Lorgar who showed him that chaos was not curse but gift, that through it he could rise higher than even the Emperor. Where once Horus had been the Emperor's most faithful, now he became the War Master of the Dark Gods. One by one, others followed. Fulgrim, the seeker of perfection, was ensnared by Slaanesh, the Lord of Excess. Mortarion, who had breathed poison since birth, embraced Nurgle, the Lord of Decay. Angron, chained to rage, gave himself fully to Khorne, the god of blood. Magnus, betrayed by his own desperate attempt to warn the Emperor, turned bitterly into Tzeentch's embrace. Perturabo, embittered and resentful, found in Horus the recognition his father had always denied. Curz, mad with visions, simply accepted the inevitable. Legions split. Brothers turned upon brothers. Sons upon sons of 20 half fell. The galaxy first tasted this betrayal at Istvan III. Horus sent loyal and traitor alike to the surface, claiming unity. Then he unleashed virus bombs, scouring the world of life, reducing billions to ash. Those who survived were consumed in flame. Loyalists who resisted were slaughtered by their own brothers. The mask was gone. Horus had declared war upon the Emperor, but worse was yet to come. At Istvan V, Horus lured the loyalist legions into a trap. They came, believing they faced only Horus's rebellion. But when the battle was joined, half the legions turned their blades against their kin. The Dropsite Massacre World Eaters tore apart salamanders. Iron warriors crushed Ravengard. Night Lords butchered the iron. Hands, thousands upon thousands of loyal sons died beneath the blades of those they once called brother. The heresy had begun. In fire and betrayal. From that moment, the Imperium burned. The traitor legions spread across the stars. Worlds once loyal now screamed their allegiance to the dark gods. Cults rose. Demons walked. The warp bled into reality. Terra itself stood as the ultimate prize. Horus would not stop until he had overthrown the Emperor and cast his throne into ruin. Yet the loyal Primarchs did not yield. Rogel Dorn fortified Terra, turning the cradle of mankind into an iron bastion. Guilliman held the eastern fringes. The line waged war in shadows. Vulcan, Corax, and others bled to hold the line. It was a war of gods, a war of brothers, a war of sons against their father. Among the greatest tragedies was Magnus, for Magnus had never wished to betray his father. When Horus fell, Magnus sought to warn the Emperor. He cast his mind through the warp, breaking every law, every ban, to deliver his message. But in doing so, he shattered the Emperor's great secret, the wards protecting Terra. Magnus's warning became a weapon. His loyalty became his doom. When the Emperor rebuked him, Magnus turned in despair to Tzeentch, the architect of fate. And thus the Crimson King was lost. As the heresy raged, the traitor fleets closed around Terra. The Emperor's dream of unity lay in ruins. Brother killed brother. Legions were shattered. The warp itself boiled with laughter, for the dark gods had achieved what they had always desired, the corruption of the Emperor's sons, and at their head was Horus, once the brightest sun, now the greatest traitor. He bore not only armies of space marines, but the favor of gods. His fleets were endless, his will unbreakable, his vengeance absolute, and so he came for Terra. The galaxy was drowning in blood. The Imperium trembled upon the edge of extinction. The War Master, corrupted and enthroned by the gods of chaos, raised his blade against the father who had given him everything. The siege of Terra was coming, and in that siege, the fate of all mankind would be decided. They were the pinnacle of creation. Demigods forged from the genius of the Emperor, scattered across a hostile galaxy and raised to lead mankind's legions. For a time, they burned like suns, brighter than any mortal could imagine. But nothing burns forever. The stars themselves die, collapsing into black holes. So too did the Primarchs. Their rise was glorious, their fall inevitable. The heresy reached its climax at Terra. The traitor fleets encircled the throne world, raining fire upon its surface. For weeks, Rogel Dorn and his defenders held the walls of the imperial palace. Sanguinius soared through fire and ruin, an angel amidst apocalypse. Mortals and Astartes alike fought to the death, their blood soaking the stones of the Emperor's dream. And above them, Horus waited. When the Emperor finally struck, it was not upon the battlefield, but within Horus's flagship. The angel went before him. Sanguinius, the beloved son, entered Horus's chambers alone. No one knows exactly what passed between them. Some say he begged his brother to return. Some claim he foresaw his own death and accepted it. But history is clear on one truth. Sanguinius died at Horus's hand. The Emperor arrived too late. His radiant son lay slain, and beyond him stood Horus, swollen with the blessings of all four dark gods. Father and son clashed in a duel that shook reality. The Emperor, even wounded and hesitant, was the greatest psyker to ever live. Horus, empowered by chaos, was might incarnate. For a time, the two seemed equals, creation and destruction bound in eternal struggle. But when Horus slaughtered a defenseless guardsman with casual contempt, the Emperor saw the truth. His son was gone. Only the gods of the warp stared back through his eyes. And so the Emperor unleashed everything. Power beyond comprehension, a psychic fury that consumed not just flesh but soul. Horus was annihilated. His essence burned away so utterly that not even chaos could restore him. The Emperor collapsed, his body broken beyond repair. Carried to the golden throne, he was entombed in living death, neither alive nor truly gone. An eternal sacrifice, the heresy ended. But for the Primarchs, the age of tragedy was only beginning. In the aftermath, Dorn became the guardian of Terra. He rebuilt walls, reforged armies, and bled himself dry to preserve his father's empire. Yet his loyalty became his curse. For when Guilliman's Codex Astartes demanded the breaking of the legions, Dorn resisted. The Imperium nearly tore itself apart in civil strife once again. At last, Dorn relented, shattering his legion into chapters. But bitterness remained. He led the Imperial fists into endless war until, in a void battle against chaos, he was lost. His hand alone was recovered, preserved as a relic. Dorn, the unyielding, became a martyr of duty. Guilliman survived the heresy, retreating to Ultramar, where he rebuilt a shattered empire within an empire. He enforced the Codex Astartes, reorganizing the legions into smaller chapters to prevent another Horus. Yet even his brilliance could not shield him forever. During battle with Fulgrim, Guilliman was struck by a blade of chaos, cursed with a wound that could never heal. For 10,000 years he lay in stasis, neither dead nor alive, until the dark millennium, when fate would call him back. Russ swore vengeance for Terra, but grief haunted him. His brother slain, his father entombed, he drank deeply of despair. One night, in the halls of the Fang, he feasted with his warriors. Then, without warning, he departed, leading his closest companions, the Wolf Brothers, on a final quest into the Eye of Terror. He promised to return for the Wolf Time, a day of great doom, but he has never been seen again. The Lion returned to Caliban, only to find his world torn by rebellion. Luther, once his closest friend, had betrayed him, corrupted by chaos. The battle that followed shattered Caliban. Luther was captured, the Dark Angels forever tainted by shame. The Lion himself vanished, wounded, concealed within the rock, the hollowed core of Caliban that remains the chapter's fortress. There he sleeps, in secret, awaiting the day he will rise again. On Macragge, Vulcan swore to protect mankind as his father had. But Vulcan was no ordinary Primarch. His body, reforged again and again, could not die. Again and again he fell in battle only to rise once more. Some say madness took him. Others call him blessed. At last he vanished, leaving behind 9 artifacts. His legacy, the 9 artifacts of Vulcan. His sons believe that when they are united, Vulcan will return. The Raven Guard had been shattered at Istvan, their numbers broken. In desperation, Corax returned to Terra, begging the Emperor for aid. With his gene seed, he created new warriors, monstrous parodies of Astartes, twisted by desperation. Racked with guilt, Corax exiled himself into the Eye of Terror. There, he hunts demons alone, his laughter cold and hollow, his body shifting into shadow itself. He is a ghost, a curse upon the darkness. Ferris never survived the heresy. On Istvan V, he faced Fulgrim, once his brother, now a slave to excess. Their duel was brutal, but Fulgrim struck the killing blow. The Gorgon fell, his head severed. His death broke the iron hands, their hearts turned to steel, their faith in flesh forever shattered. Fulgrim, once the shining blade of perfection, was consumed by Slaanesh. His body became a vessel of the Prince of Excess, his soul bound to endless pleasure and torment. He wanders the Eye of Terror as a serpentine demon prince, eternally beautiful, eternally damned. Perturabo, master of sieges, was cursed with immortality by chaos. His iron will became iron flesh. A demon prince of fortresses, he builds endless labyrinths of despair in the Eye. Yet no matter how vast his empire, bitterness gnaws at him. He is the architect of his own prison. Mortarion, who had breathed poison since birth, found his final master in Nurgle. The Death Lord became a demon prince, his body rotting, his wings diseased, his heart cold. Upon his plague planet he reigns, a god of despair, his legions spreading pestilence without end. Angron, broken since childhood, had known nothing but rage. Chaos offered him no peace, only more fury. Ascended as a demon prince of Khorne, Angron leads endless hosts of berserkers, his roar echoing through eternity. There is no strategy, no vision, only slaughter. Angron is rage incarnate. Magnus, betrayed by his own attempt to save his father, embraced Tzeentch. His flesh twisted, his eye aflame. He rules the planet of the sorcerers, a throne world adrift in the warp. He is brilliance turned to arrogance, hope twisted to ruin. Yet deep within, some whisper he still mourns what might have been. Kurz foresaw his own death. Madness consumed him, his visions of doom fulfilled at every turn. At last he waited upon his throne, unguarded, unafraid. An assassin came, sent by the Imperium, and Kurz did not resist. He was struck down, laughing, for in death he proved himself right. There was no hope, only darkness. The twins of the Alpha Legion remain enigma. Some say Alfarius was slain by Guilliman. Others whisper it was a lie. The truth is uncertain, for the Hydra has many heads. They weave plots still, loyal or traitor. None can say. 2 Primarchs are lost entirely, their names erased, their legions forgotten. No records remain. No songs are sung, only silence. Some say they fell to chaos, others that the Emperor himself destroyed them. Their fate is the greatest mystery of all. The Primarchs were gods made flesh, yet gods can fall. Some lie dead, their bones dust upon battlefields. Others rule as demon princes, eternal yet damned. A few slumber, awaiting the day they might rise again. And fewer still endure, scarred, broken, yet loyal. Their father sits upon the golden throne, a corpse emperor sustained by faith in machines, his dream of unity shattered. The galaxy burns still 10,000 years later. The sons of the emperor are gone. Their legacy remains, a legacy of fire and of ash. The heresy was over, but its echoes would never fade. For though Horus lay dead and the traitor fleets scattered, the galaxy itself had been broken. The dream of unity was gone. The Imperium that remained was not the shining beacon the Emperor had promised, but a shadow, a husk, a corpse that walked because it had no choice but to endure. The throne world was a graveyard. The blood of billions soaked Terra's soil. The imperial palace stood in ruin, its walls cracked, its towers shattered, rebuilt only with the bones of the fallen. The Emperor, once radiant and alive, now sat upon the golden throne in eternal torment. He neither spoke nor moved nor reigned, yet his presence endured. His mind reached into the warp, burning like a beacon, guiding humanity's fleets through the endless void. Without him, the Imperium would collapse. With him, it endured, but only as a prison of faith and fear. The imperial truth was dead. Where once the Emperor had forbidden worship, now worship consumed the Imperium. For the common man, the Emperor was no longer a ruler. He was a god, a savior, a deity of golden light, seated upon his throne of eternity. The ecclesiarchy rose from this devotion, binding mankind not with reason, but with religion. The Primarchs became myths. The loyalists turned into saints, their deeds retold as holy scripture. Sanguinius, the angel, worshipped as martyr and redeemer. Guilliman, the lawgiver. Dorn, the unyielding. Vulcan, the eternal protector. Rus, the wolf king who would return in mankind's darkest hour. Even the traitors became legends, though spoken only in whispers. Horus, the arch-traitor, damned forever. Fulgrim, the serpent. Mortarion, the plague lord. Angron, the butcher. Magnus, the sorcerer. They became not just fallen sons, but devils in the eyes of mankind. The legions were broken. Guilliman's Codex Astartes demanded that no chapter ever wield such power again. Where once there had been 20 legions, now there were hundreds of chapters. Unity was gone. The galaxy itself was scarred. The eye of terror gaped wider than ever, a wound across the stars that bled demons and madness. The traitor Primarchs, ascended to demonhood, ruled their shadow empires within. Everywhere else, mankind lived in fear. Worlds burned, Xenos empires rose and fell, and chaos whispered still. The Imperium did not live. It endured. 10,000 years passed. The Primarchs faded into legend. To the people of the Imperium, they are no longer men who fought, bled, and fell. They are gods and demons, saints and devils, angels of light and monsters of shadow. Their statues tower above cathedral worlds. Their names are carved into the hymns of billions. And yet, in truth, most are dead, damned, or lost. The dream of the Emperor ended not with their triumph, but with their fall. The aftermath of the heresy was not peace. It was silence after a storm. And in that silence, mankind built a religion upon ashes, worshipping the corpse of a god who had never wanted faith, only reason. The Primarchs had been his instruments. Now they were his myths. The story of the Primarchs is not merely history. It is tragedy, it is myth, it is prophecy. For in them we see not perfection, but flaw, not eternity, but ruin. They were demigods, yet they were men. They were heroes, yet they were monsters. They rose like suns and fell like meteors. And in their fall, they scarred the galaxy forever. Even now, 10,000 years later, their shadows linger. The sons of Dorn still guard Terra, unyielding. The sons of Sanguinius bear the curse of their father, their wings unseen, their thirst unending. The wolves of Rus hunt still, awaiting the return of their lord. The ravens of Corax whisper through the dark. The sons of Vulcan search for their father's relics, praying for his return. And beyond, the traitors endure. Mortarion spreads plague across 1,000,000 worlds. Angron's rage ignites battlefields without end. Fulgrim whispers temptation through eternity. Magnus schemes in the warp, ever the Crimson King. Perturabo builds labyrinths of despair. The galaxy is not free of them. It never will be. The Emperor's dream was unity. His gift was knowledge. His curse was silence. He made his sons too strong and too flawed. He gave them purpose but not peace, love but not freedom. In their tragedy, we see his own. He sits upon the golden throne, his mind ablaze across the warp, his body withered, his voice silent. His sons are gone, but their echoes remain. Every chapter, every battle, every prayer, every heresy, all of it is their legacy. So what were the Primarchs? Were they saviors? Yes. Were they conquerors? Yes. Were they monsters? Yes. Were they gods? Perhaps, but above all, they were sons. Sons who loved, sons who hated, sons who rose, sons who fell. And in their rise and fall, they left a scar across the galaxy that can never be healed. The stars remember them. The people worship them. The enemies fear them. And the warp hungers for them still. They are gone, dead, damned, or waiting. But their echoes remain. For the Primarchs were more than men. They were the reflections of humanity itself, brilliant, terrible, and doomed. Gods born of flesh, demigods cursed to fall. Their story is not just the story of the Imperium, it is the story of mankind. And like all such stories, it ends not in glory, but in shadow.